You're a good debater and you're not afraid of a fight. So why have your comments off? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I've turned them on for a lot of things.
On your shorts you do.
Right. In some of my lives, I think they're on, but almost as soon as I turn them on, there's photos of my family's homes, what's the address, and at what point, and I just want to clarify,
please.
I don't have to take that abuse.
Agreed.
Like, I don't come to work and slap the dick out of their mouth.
Kind of why do you have a disdain for informants, in your opinion?
I don't disdain them. I downright fucking hate them. That's what it means. That's okay. But see, this is why I can say it. That guy Jeff's crazy. He's on medication. I have a disdain for them because no man should ever go to prison on the words of another man, number one. Number two, in 90% of the cases you look at, the informant has done more vile and disturbing crap than those that are being accused. Number three, I find it oxymoronic when a man, Joey Merlino, because everybody knows who he is, he goes in front of a judge, they can bring up everything he's ever been accused of, including murders and whatever else. Even though he's acquitted, it doesn't really matter because it's a character judgment. But yet in that same case, you can't turn that around and say, well, let's judge the rat. Judges don't allow that. So for me, it's like you're walking in, you're already behind the eight ball.
And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
You're a good debater and you're not afraid of a fight.
Hey, welcome to Mob Talk Radio. Happy Friday to everybody. We've got a bit of breaking news, sort of. A lot of people have not been covering this, just like they didn't cover the Jim Biden thing either. We always strive to bring you more in-depth analysis of what's going on than most people on YouTube. If you are a subscriber to our podcast, there was a new podcast that was dropped yesterday. Also, if you wish to donate, there are all the things you can do down there to donate to the channel. And what that simply does is enable us to bring you more content. So what is going on? Well, I'm going to preface by pulling this up really quick. And we've got some pictures to show you and etc. But this is a very, very interesting case. For those of you that know, and those of you that don't know, former DEA agent by the name of Joe Bongiovanni, excuse me for a second, he's in deep trouble. And the feds are alleging that a tenured DEA agent was basically the inside man for the Buffalo Mafia. According to reports, he gave inside information and protected the Mafia from investigations and indictments by funneling information to the Mafia and for derailing ongoing investigations. The federal trial that began earlier this month, the FBI portrays Bongiovanni as a greedy, racist criminal who got $250,000 in kickbacks from the Mafia in the last decade. Bongiovanni, who grew up around several of Buffalo's mob element, would go to extremes to protect them and would open up fake case files and investigations and would encourage colleagues to investigate African Americans and Hispanics, calling them the N-word and the S-word. I'm not going to say it, but he was caught on wiretap saying that. So in 2019, when the feds began to look into rumors about Bongiovanni, they got a tip early. He got the tip early, retired immediately, and then factory reset his phone. In a sweeping indictment, he is charged with obstruction of justice, bribery, and conspiracy, and is looking at a life sentence for his actions. Since 2015, and this is just sort of a subplot, but since 2015, 16 federal agents have been brought up on federal charges, and it's an ongoing problem not just for the DEA, but as well the FBI. The crimes charged to DEA and FBI agents have included child pornography, drug trafficking, selling illegal firearms to known felons, leaking intelligence to defense attorneys, and etc. And another huge case, a DEA agent in Chicago helped narco traffickers smuggle thousands of kilos of cocaine from Puerto Rico to New York City. Let alone 3 agents on that list of some of the crimes we just read are serving more than 10 years in prison. And one of those convicted was actually convicted of laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel, just to show you. And what's more at flaw here is the DEA's background checks. Bongiovanni was a former drug addict, and there was a lot of information about his ties to the Mafia in Buffalo. Bongiovanni should have been found out sooner, but it took a snitch who was paying Bongiovanni for protection. It took him to start talking for them to figure this out. So the trial is ongoing, and it's going to include sex trafficking charges. And it also included, as a co-conspirator, a judge who killed himself shortly after the FBI raided his home. Not long after the indictment, informants began showing up on, not informants. Shortly after this, dead rats began showing up on witnesses' doorsteps. So they would wake up in the morning, go to open their door, and there'd be a dead rat in front of their door. Bongiovanni, who was raised in Buffalo, was known as the DEA as a door kicker, not a sort of pencil pusher. Just he was a guy that wanted the action. Now, the prosecution claims that Bongiovanni protected drug traffickers and would release fake information to prosecutors to either avert prosecutions for his friends or to push them in another direction altogether. Bongiovanni's status in the DEA allowed him to get intel from the NSA, FBI, and other government institutional groups about surveillance and ongoing investigations and wiretaps, and Bongiovanni would tip off his friends and clients for basically giving them that information. Bongiovanni is also accused of vouching for criminals, filing fake reports, and stealing sensitive DEA case files on organized crime specifically. Bongiovanni is accused of protecting Pharaoh's strip club, nestled just outside of Buffalo, which prosecutors described as a one-stop shop for narcotics and sex. The owner, Peter Garace Jr., is an alleged made man within the Buffalo crime family and has deep ties to the Outlaws MC. Let me just pull up a picture of Garace really quick. This is going to be a photo of him and his ex-wife, and that's going to be important because she has been testifying. Nice lady. Let me see here. Let me stop that. Let me present this. I'm going to show you a photo of her. This is Garace with his ex-wife. So basically, like we said, Bongiovanni is accused of protecting Pharaoh Strip Club, which Garace owned. And the owner, as we said, Peter Garace, is an alleged made man within the Buffalo crime family and has deep ties to the Outlaws MC. In one instance at the club, a stripper overdosed, and Garace called Bongiovanni for advice, and that evidence is presented through a voicemail in which Garace asks Bongiovanni about tracing a drug dealer's phone number. Garace wanted the dealer's phone pinned to get a location on the dealer so he could go handle his business. There are a ton of witnesses in this case, which include dozens of law enforcement officers, a public city school teacher who admitted to law enforcement that she was subletting her income by forming a marijuana growing operation while getting tips and information from Bongiovanni about investigations and surveillance. The trial is still going on, and attorneys for Bongiovanni claim to be able to refute all of the charges. But it's not looking good for Bongiovanni. I got to be honest. And I say that because Garachi's ex-wife testified on Tuesday. You can see her there on the left, that she personally handed Bongiovanni envelopes at the strip club. In more testimony, she said that for Bongiovanni's 50th birthday, he was handed $5,000 in cash from her ex-husband. In days prior to that testimony, Louis Salvo and Ronnie Serio tested that they oversaw negotiations and funded a scheme in which they paid Bongiovanni $4,000 a month to protect Serio from investigations looking into his drug trafficking organization. While they said the money was handed to Bongiovanni, the money was not directly handed to him person to person from Salvo or Serio, but rather a guy by the name of Michael Masecchia, who is currently in prison. So let me pull up a photo of Masecchia really quick, because this was another part of a ongoing case. All right. The photo you're about to see is Michael Masecchia, who is actually an English school teacher of a high school of 30 years. So let's pull this up. All right, that there is Michael Masecchia, okay? Masecchia, like I said, who was a high school English teacher who worked in the public school system in Buffalo for 30 years. In 2019, Masecchia was arrested on federal narcotics charges. When the police raided his home, a ton of guns, wads of cash, homemade explosives, and a ton of narcotics were found. Bongiovanni made sure for years that any investigation into Masecchia was blocked. To law enforcement's knowledge, Bongiovanni blocked at least a dozen or more investigations into Masecchia. Masecchia is a noted associate of the Buffalo crime family, and the feds believe he is an actual inducted member of the Mafia in Buffalo. Don't know if that's the case. The feds always allege that kind of stuff, but Masecchia is the one who paid Bongiovanni over $250,000 over a decade to protect him. So the indictment details the lengths that Bongiovanni allegedly went from late 2009 onwards to protect individual in court documents as co-conspirator number one, paying Giovanni, which would have been Masecchia. In one instance, co-conspirator one violated the terms of his federal supervised release from prison. So Bongiovanni called the U.S. probation officer to mitigate any sanctions that might have been imposed. Days later, Bongiovanni allegedly lied in a DEA report that co-conspirator one had acted as a confidential source and had provided information to the DEA in narcotics investigations, which was a bold-faced lie. In June of 2016, Bongiovanni attempted to dissuade other special agents from subpoenaing phone records of contacts between him and co-conspirator one by asking his colleague if he hated Italians. 2 months later, co-conspirator one called Bongiovanni after a stripper overdosed on drugs at a gentleman's club he operated in Chicotagua, New York. Bongiovanni, according to the indictment, told him, "Get her out of the club and dump her in the alley." And it should be known that any contact I had with co-conspirator one in the past was minimal in-person contact and primarily consisted of random telephone communication based on the fact that we were childhood friends, Bongiovanni would later write in a November 2018 DEA memo. He also would say, "I would sometimes randomly encounter co-conspirator one." Okay, excuse me. Co-conspirator one is Garachi. Okay. We would meet at a restaurant or a golf outing, and, you know, made plans to meet him socially over the next few years. On Bongiovanni's last day on the job with the DEA in February of 2019, he wipes all the data off of his phone and removed the DEA case file against those who were paying him before hiding it in the basement of his home. So we're going to go back to his ex-wife again, because she has more crap that she's testifying to. All right, let's go back here to the wife. All right, this is Garachi and his wife. We're going to go back to that again. So his ex-wife, whose name is Katrina Negro, would acknowledge that the Outlaws had a special night at the club, typical Wednesday nights, and they would hold church in the strip club. The prosecution would claim that John Ehrman, who was the national leader of the Outlaws, according to the feds, would then become the manager of the club. She also would claim that Garachi pimped out women to friends and patrons. And in 2015, when a stripper overdosed, Garachi told the bouncers, throw her out in the alley and let her die. Negro will continue to testify this week and I think into next week. Garachi himself is looking at a slew of charges and isn't going to trial for another couple months. For Bongiovanni and Garachi, it really doesn't look good. I got to be honest with you, with all the stuff that they have coming out. And Mafia, who has refused to testify under any sort of conditions, and he is the school teacher that we showed you a photo of, he got 7 years in federal prison for narcotics violations and for weapons charges. So it's a very interesting case. You have a school teacher, you have another school teacher, you have organized crime. And I think it's really interesting that, you have a school teacher who for 30 years was one of the biggest traffickers in the area, and the DEA protected him. Now, while this is one sort of off the wall type of case, I think the reality is this is nothing new to me. It's nothing new to me. We have been talking about FBI misconduct, DEA misconduct. In fact, we've written article after article about the sheer amount of money that the government and really the public pays for all of these investigations. But it looks like Bongiovanni, he's going to end up, the way it looks. And I know that I always sort of look at a case on its heels, look at the information, but it's very hard to refute when you're in a position of power like that. If you go back to the old Gambino's case where a bunch of guys got arrested for handing, C-16 case squad files on investigations into the Gambinos, the Gotti people, not the Gotti people, but the Gambinos. Gotti was the boss at the time. They had somebody within the C-16 squad that was handing them case files. And this happened prior to Gotti too. This is nothing new. But the reality is that when you are in a position of power like that, it's very hard to say you didn't do these things when there's case files, there's 302s, like we talk about all the time, and the FBI, especially when you bring up a guy like John Connolly, whose 302s were a fucking joke. If you ever get the opportunity to read any of Whitey Bulger's 302s, it's the same thing on page 16 that's on page 5,436. And if you know anything about 302s, and here's my other thing, and I'm going to say this, and I want you guys to understand this. Anybody who comes on here and tells you they read all the 302s is lying to you. You cannot get access to an informant's 302s unless they are released. Now, some of Sammy's came out, but they're not 302s. What they are is FBI surveillance reports based on information that a cooperator gives them. So, for instance, what a 302 is it's an informal question and answer. And so when you have a 302, it's memorialized, right? There's a difference between what a proffer session is. You're basically giving the feds information about other people and other crimes in hopes to lower your either sentencing or to get them to back off prosecuting. There's a difference between a proffer and an actual 302. People say all the time on here, oh, he sat down for a 302. You don't sit down for a 302. It's a question and it's an answer. So, I mean, in essence, yes, you sit down, but it's like people have a tendency of saying it like it's, oh, well, they sit down and sign a form. No, they sit down and an FBI agent says, okay, today is June 16th, blah, 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 blah. I'm sitting here with this person who's an alleged member of XYZ. And he says, in 1986, you were standing outside of Tits McGee's Bar and Grill. John Gotti was there. Neil Delacroce was there. Angelo Ruggiero was there. And XYZ was shot. What do you know about that? So when you look at a 302, it'll show the question. Underneath, it'll have the answer from the person that is giving them the information. Well, according to what I believe, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and then they write it down. And then if they can branch off an investigation from that, that's what they're going to do. But a lot of the reports that are out there are surveillance reports. And what it is I think there's like maybe one 302 from Sammy that's out publicly. The rest are all FBI surveillance reports. And what those are is it's Sammy sitting down and, they're just talking and he's just giving up information. There's a big difference between a 302 and a sort of a informal question and answer thing. And obviously you guys know the difference of what a proffer is. A proffer is you're volunteering. The FBI isn't calling you down to their office to ask you questions. You call them and you're asking them to sit down with you because you want to rat people out. That's what a proffer session is. I don't care who wants to weave it, whatever way they want to weave it. A proffer session is you make a phone call to the feds and you sit down and you volunteer information. And you're doing that in hopes of stifling a prosecution or seeing if you can get a deal. So you can add whatever, sort of title you want to, but a lot of people have proffered. A lot of people, Michael Cohen, we know proffered. There's been terrorists that proffered. We know that Greg Scarpa Jr. proffered and was a rat too as well. So there's a lot of people that have proffered throughout the years. But I think people get lost on this whole proffering thing like, oh, it just, they just basically, the FBI drags them in and just wants to talk. No, you have to reach out to them. And you're basically saying, I'm going to give you crimes. I'm going to give you individuals. And you're doing that in hopes that they're going to stop prosecuting you or they're going to offer you a plea deal. And that's just what a proffer is. A lot of people have done those. So that's the difference between all of those. But in the case of Joe Bongiovanni here, it's going to be hard for them to beat these charges. There's way too many people testifying. There's way too much information. There's way too many cold, hard facts. And I think looking at John Connolly specifically, he expected the FBI to step up and help him. And they didn't. They bailed on him because that whole entire case with Whitey Bulger is something different that we'll talk about at some point on a live. But and then the opposite of John Connolly would be Lynn DeVecchio, who the FBI stood up for. And Lynn DeVecchio, in some ways, was worse than John Connolly. John Connolly protected people, etc., but DeVecchio gave witness addresses so people could kill them. There's a big difference between what the two of them did. They're both despicable guys, don't get me wrong, but there are some subtle differences. So for Joe Bongiovanni, it looks like it's going to be lights out. I have the indictment. I have all that. I've gone through it. And I got to be honest with you. We go through indictments on this show all the time. But the reality is this indictment is pretty gruesome. I'm sure that Peter Garachi would love to punch his ex-wife in the head a couple 100 times for testifying against him. She's getting her revenge for something else, obviously. But it's going to be very hard to beat that case when you have all of these people coming out of the woodwork. And of course, anytime you're dealing with a DEA agent, you're going to have, superiors throughout the DEA and other people that are in law enforcement that dealt with you that know what's going on. So I think it's really going to be hard. And if somehow they get Masecchia to rat to turn, which he's not going to because he would have been on the witness list anyway. And he's not, which means he's refused to testify. But if somehow they manage to flip him, which I think it's a little late in the game for them to do that at this point, then it's definitely lights out. It's just too much information, too many things, voicemail, stuff like that, factory resets, which, that's a rat move anyway. J.R. Rubio factory reset his phone. You know what I mean? So this is a tactic we've seen, but if I had to base my opinion based on what I see in the indictment and then the corroborating evidence, the guy's guilty as fuck. No way around it. Guilty as fuck. Don't care if he, defended Italians, didn't. I mean, this is exactly why what we talk about on this show is so important, because this is another example of crooked ass agents doing surreptitious stuff. Now, it's a little different in terms of he was looking out for mob guys and et cetera, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. Garbage is garbage, right? And that guy is garbage. That's all he is. I mean, the American taxpayers pay salaries of these people to do this kind of stuff. And listen, in my opinion, is he as bad as John Connolly, or is he as bad as some of these other ones who have protected informants? Yeah, he's just as bad. I mean, granted, I know optics wise, like you guys would probably think I would prefer somebody protect Italians or protect the mob guys or whatever, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, you're still doing corruptible shit. And so for me, like I always say on this show, if you're going to get convicted, it should never be on the words of another man. It should be because they got DNA, they got footage, they got this, they have proof. But many times in federal mob cases, let's just be honest, there's not enough evidence for the government to prove their case. It always hinges on some toothless mob rat who was never anything, who invents on the fly. There was a former, well, not a former, but a federal informant who literally said on the stand in a big trial that he tailored his testimony to the narrative that the FBI wanted him to speak on. And I'm sure when the FBI heard that and he said that on the stand, I almost wonder if the prosecutors choked, because it's an unwritten no-no. You don't say that publicly, but that's pretty much what it is. If there was an incentive for an informant in certain cases to be honest, they would. But the problem is, and the problem you're always going to have, and even maybe some informants will agree with this, probably not, because most informants fucking hate me. But the reality is you would be hard-pressed to find one informant in a group of 300 that did what he did because he felt it was the right, well, they all feel like it's the right thing to do. But there is a difference between spitting the facts, inventing shit, and then taking a big paycheck for it. And that's all I'm saying. Really at the end of the day, it's up to a jury. Informants or witnesses can say whatever they want, but it's really up to the jury. It's up to the jury. And that's just how it is. So for Bongiovanni here, it's a bad look for the DEA. But we've known the DEA was crooked for a long time. This is nothing new. It's nothing new with the FBI either. So that's what's going on. We will probably keep covering this case as it gets going, but it's getting more interesting because some of the stories that are coming out are absolutely insane. The lawyers for Bongiovanni have said they can refute everything. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. Not in this case, not with voicemails, not with some of the things that are obviously going to be proven. But it's going to come down to an American jury, which I have no faith in. Even if you're guilty, like you're still rolling the dice with an American jury because let's be honest, juries are not that smart. They're just not. Not that there's a better way to fix the system, but I think even people that are guilty and people that have been innocent and been accused both ways, I'll tell you that there's no stock in the jury. You would be, in some cases, like I've heard this before with a lot of defendants, they'll say, I would rather have the judge. Like, I don't want a jury. I want the judge to decide. Some people think that's the best way of doing things. Then some people want a jury trial. I don't know which one's best. I think at least with the jury, you have 12 or 13 or 14 options to hope to God they believe you, which is better than one. So I can understand why people roll the dice either way. But this is a horrible look for the DEA. I do not know if this is going to supersede into something else with organized crime in Buffalo. We shall see. But it's an interesting case. If you're curious about it, look it up for yourself and let me know what you think. If you haven't had a chance, please do us a solid, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and donate if you can also as well. If you guys are interested, mobtalkradioshow.supercast.com is where you can find our 3.5-hour podcast every Friday, usually 5 a month. And there you go. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. And if you're interested in this case, or maybe you have some insights or want to share your opinion, you can do so in the comments section, or you can email the show at mobtalkradioshow@gmail.com. And for those that do leave comments, they'll be blocked and they'll be removed if you're just going to troll and be insulting. So all that being said, have a great weekend and stay out of trouble.